I'm Tina Fordham, and you're watching The Navigator, Geopolitical Strategy for Boards and the C-Suite. As 2023 comes to a close, financial markets are in a risk-on mood, mainly thanks to hopes of a rate-cutting cycle in 2024. But at the same time, the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Hamas showed no sign of resolution. According to KPMG's latest survey, chief executives ranked geopolitics and political uncertainty as the single greatest risk to growth for the year ahead. And meanwhile, economists continue to debate the prospect of a soft landing versus a recession. In the 25 years that I've been advising business leaders about global forces, we have never seen such a complex and fluid backdrop. In this episode of The Navigator, we'll discuss why the outcomes emerging during the course of 2024 will impact the shape of the second half of this already transformational decade. With that in mind, my first PQ point for today, PQ being our shorthand for raising your political quotient, is to resist the temptation of expecting mean reversion. Well, one of the main takeaways about the 2024 outlook is the striking number of contradictions. For example, some of the highest growth markets like the US, China, Saudi Arabia, and India also have considerable exposure to political risk factors. US elections are, of course, the center of this year's election cycle, the biggest election year in human history, with many US investors likely to welcome a Trump victory. Global business leaders, however, will be worried about his campaign promise of a 10% across-the-board hike in import tariffs, while U.S. allies in Europe and Asia will worry that a Trump victory would mean a U.S. withdrawal from its security commitments, potentially putting them at risk from hostile neighbors. As a case in point, an imminent halt to U.S. defense aid to Ukraine is now a material risk in our view, partly a byproduct of the U.S. domestic debate on the immigration agenda. In short, we are a long way from any kind of uniform trend, and the interlinkages between these risks is something new, hence my reference to new doom loops, a term I've coined to highlight the collision between wars and elections with more below-radar factors like public opposition to immigration and climate change policies. Now let's turn to our Navigator Watchlist for December. Investors like to think of developments in terms of signal versus noise, but this construct isn't very useful when it comes to geopolitical factors. So with this in mind, we've created the Navigator Watchlist, our relative ranking of the geopolitical factors that we assess are the most likely to move markets. The first thing to point out is the fact that the risks identified here are all either active or highly plausible. This in itself is a sign of the times. We continue to regard the risk of escalation in the Middle East as significant and one that markets are underpricing. US-China tensions always feature at the top of the list of concerns, and so the improved mood music following the meeting between Presidents Biden and Xi at the recent APEC summit is a welcome shift. But having said that, we remain cautious about a genuine move to friendly relations between Beijing and Washington, despite the obvious mutual self-interest for both parties. Why? Well, simply put, we think China has not changed its strategy, only its tactics. As for coups in West Africa, these are on our watch list because they could trigger an influx of immigration to Europe during a time when populist parties, such as in the Netherlands, are gaining ground by campaigning against immigration. There's a lot more to say, but I'll stop here for now and leave you with a quote from French scientist Louis Pasteur: "Fortune favors the brave, but chance favors the prepared mind," because it illustrates the way of thinking that guides our approach for anticipating both risks and opportunities. If you'd like to stay in touch with our views, please connect with Fordham Global Foresight on LinkedIn and sign up to our free private newsletter, and contact us directly about speaking to your board, leadership team, or clients to raise your organization's PQ for 2024.